glad you're here and just in time. This Tom turkey is just busting to get out of the oven. Oh, there he is. I cooked him in foil, and I opened up the foil just the last 20 minutes to brown, and he did so nicely. You see, I removed the skin because the skin is the biggest source of saturated fat, and I sure don't baste it in that fat. That would just be bathing it in the very fat that I'm trying to avoid. And you know, this turkey breast is only 12% fat calories, so it's very lean. Now, I cooked this bird fast and hot. He's 11 pounds. I cooked him for 3 hours, just about between 2.5 and 3, at 450 degrees. And there's a roasting chart at the end of this tape if you want to try your hand at skinless poultry roasting. For this weight, smaller and bigger birds, turkey breast was one of our favorites, and that'll go real fast around here. We'll eat the legs, but we won't trim him clean because we do like the white meat so much better. Now, I will take the carcass of this bird, and indeed, I will take the table remains off the plates of my family. I wouldn't do it if guests were coming, but it's all in the family. And I'll put it in a big stew pot, and I'll make soup stock. And then, when it gets down just to room temperature, I'll put it in a jar. And of course, the fat always rises to the top. You know the old saying, the cream always rises to the top? Well, it's because it's full of fat. And fat is light, fat floats. Now, if you have a sealer jar that won't leak, you see the fat will come to the top, which is, of course, really the bottom of the jar. And then you can open it and pour off whatever you need. And another neat thing about using a sealer jar, whenever, it looks like I need to start a new one, I'm just pretty well full there. Whenever you use canned beans, don't throw this liquid away. It's valuable. A lot of the fiber is in this liquid. Look here at all this soluble fiber that's in this liquid. So let that contribute to your stock of stock. So just throw that right in there with the chicken stock, and the fat will make its way through that to the top, I guarantee you. And you can freeze it. Nothing sacred about it. Just I throw the sealer jars right in the freezer and just pull them out as I need them. Now, we skin everything. I mean, virtually nothing passes our lips unskinned in this house. And for a quicker poultry meal, we often do chicken breasts, and I like to do them on the grill because, you know, all their fat goes right down into the grill there, and we don't end up eating so much. So these chicken breasts have all been skinned, and this is fast. This is not a long process. These two were basted in oyster sauce, and these 3 are covered in non-fat salad oil. I'm just going to turn on the fan here at Roar, get rid of that smoke. Yes, and you can use, I happen to have used ranch. I really like the non-fat ranch. But gosh, you could use any non-fat, no oil salad dressing that you like. And as long as you keep turning them, you know, and work with them, they're not going to burn. So I know people write and say, well, listen, how many days in a week can you eat a plain old baked chicken breast? Well, it does get boring, but if you think of different ways to prepare poultry, different toppings, different marinades, I don't find it boring at all. And believe me, we gather around this stove and we can have this whole meal done in 15, 20 minutes. They really go fast. Have you got an indoor grill? You know, health professionals are telling us that North Americans typically eat 40% of our daily calories as fat. Out of all the calories we eat in a day, we eat 40% of them as fat. And basically it's killing us. And health professionals are saying, look, you got to cut it down. You got to make your fat intake a maximum. That is a ceiling of 30%. And I say to you, if you have body fat that you want to lose, you'd see progress a lot sooner if you could work that down to 20% fat. And I think that's pretty well what we eat in this family. And golly, we don't have any trouble. I certainly don't go around hungry and don't feel denied. And you don't want to go around hungry. You don't want to fast. You want to just make leaner food choices. So eat less fat, not less food. You know, adults really shouldn't go below 1,000 calories a day. Under 1,000 calories a day is starvation. No joke. It is on the borderline of starvation dieting. And it may well make you obsessed with food. You're not eating enough, so all you can think about is food. It will certainly cause fatigue. And the worst part is that it will likely lower your basal metabolism rate. You know, the BMR is the rate at which our bodies burn calories all the time, even at sleep, just to sustain life. Well, you slow down that basal metabolism rate and you're just setting yourself up for weight regain. You will regain body fat on fewer calories than ever. Really, you're worse off than you ever were before. Now, a gram of fat is worth 9 calories. A gram of protein or carbohydrate is only 4 calories. So a gram of fat is twice as fattening as protein or carbohydrate. Alcohol is in there at 7 calories a gram. So it goes protein and carbohydrate 4, alcohol 7, fat 9. That says to us that fat is the densest form of energy available. Fat is the most fattening. Now, with the poultry we've worked with here, particularly because we've skinned it, these guys are almost ready, we're working mainly with protein because there's not much fat. This is only 12% fat calories. And the chicken breasts are, well, they come in a little higher, I think somewhere around 15, somewhere in there. Very lean. But were we to cook our goose, a domestic goose, we'd be working mainly with fat. Do you know that a domestic goose is 80% fat calories? Out of all the calories in a domestic goose, 80% of them are fat. We did once cook one here, and the roasting pan was darn near overflowing with fat. So you want to try and make choices that are lean. You know, fat, dietary fat, is real readily stored in our fat cells. It's just right ready to zip into those fat cells. It needs very little processing. But protein and carbohydrate have to have a lot of processing going on inside our bodies before they could even be stored as fat. If you ate 100 calories, your body would waste 23% of those, or 23 calories, just getting the other 77 calories ready to go into fat storage. So you lose 23% of all the carbohydrate and protein that you eat. With fat, if you ate 100 calories of fat, you only lose 3%. The energy cost to transfer dietary fat, right there on the top of this stalk, into body fat is only 3%. I eat 100 calories of fat, I can deposit 97 of those on my body. Fat is the most fattening of all of our food components and the very densest form of energy we have. Now, it's great if you're going to Ethiopia, but it's not so good if you're leaving here in North America. Now, what's all this talk about healthy fats? There are some fats that are better and some worse for our heart. Now, how much fat do we need total? We're eating about 40% of our daily calories as fat. We want to lower that down to 30 max, 20 even better. But let's talk about where we get and you got to have some, but where we get them. Saturated fat is solid at room temperature. In fact, the building blocks of fat are called fatty acids, and they're chemical chains of carbon. They have hydrogen and oxygen attached. And when a fatty acid is holding all the hydrogen it can hold, it's saturated. You can think to yourself, saturated with hydrogen. Okay, this is saturated with hydrogen. It's saturated fat. It comes from animal sources. This is butter. But it also comes from a couple of plant sources, palm and coconut. And so you want to beware when you see those on the label. The problem in eating saturated fat is that our bodies use the saturated fat to make cholesterol, the cholesterol that gets deposited in our vessels and clogs us up and causes heart attacks and strokes. The more saturated fat we eat, the more cholesterol we seem to produce. Now, we need to use less fat totally, particularly we need to use less saturated fat. Unsaturated fats have more room for hydrogen. So polyunsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature and come from plant sources, and common ones are safflower and corn oil. And they are more healthy for our heart than saturated fats. So we're getting a little better here in terms of heart health. But monounsaturated fatty acids have very few openings available for hydrogen. It hardly has any room for hydrogen to attach. They are liquid at room temperature and come from plant sources. And two primary sources of monounsaturated fatty acids are olive oil and canola oil. And we grow canola right here on the western prairies. So that's why I buy this in the big in fact, let me show you what the oil really looks like. In the big container, I decanter our canola oil. And although I don't use a lot of fat, I use these two almost exclusively. I use so little butter that I have to keep it in the freezer to keep it from going rancid. So these monounsaturated fats then are more heart healthy than the other two. Now, hydrogenated fats are any of these. They are the unsaturated fats that have had hydrogen added. And it makes them more saturated, and it makes them less healthy, more harmful. So watch. You see, that's a little bit of a trick. You might use a polyunsaturated fat and then hydrogenate it, and it looks like it might be a good, healthy corn oil, but once it's hydrogenated, it ain't so healthy. So, how are you going to use more monounsaturated fat? How are you going to get that saturated fat out of your diet and make more use of the monounsaturates? I cook everything with olive oil and canola oil. I make cookies. Yeah, I bake with these unsaturated fats, and I can't taste a bit of difference, and I've never met anyone who could. Now, let me just show you my cookies over here. These are little oatmeal chews. They come from one of my favorite cookbooks, and I feel no recipe is sacred. Nothing is sacred. I'll dicker with anything to get the fat out. This recipe called for, by the way, this recipe is at the end of the tape, so don't worry about the ingredients. It called for a half a cup of butter. Butter! Yikes, I say. Yikes. A, it's butter. B, it's a half a cup. I'm not about to put that on my hips. Flour, baking soda, baking powder, and then the wet stuff all goes over here. A little bit of oil, and that is a quarter cup of olive oil. I made this recipe with canola oil and with olive oil. I can't tell a bit of difference. 1 egg, a little vanilla. Oh, here's some cinnamon that goes in the dry stuff. And honey. Now, the first time I made them, I didn't use the honey. I did the same thing that the recipe called for. I just used the brown sugar. And that turned out fine. Remember, I cut the oil down from a half a cup to a quarter of a cup. I'll almost never use as much oil as they say. And when I made them without the honey, they came looking like this. A little bit like a ginger snap. A little bit dry, a little brittle. And I quite like them. I mean, they have a really nice taste. However, my teenager thought they should be more moist. And so I made the next 2 batches with canola and honey. I cannot tell the difference between the olive oil and the canola ones, nor can I taste the difference, and I defy anybody to. So, I mean, it can certainly be done. Now these little guys, you know, you just generally mix all the wet stuff and add it to the dry stuff, and they just come out fine. The only trick here is with the oatmeal and raisins, you got to mash them up just a little bit. Hold your ears, here goes. And so, you know, I don't keep baking all the time. I mean, we just don't keep sweets around all the time. Didn't go. But I do occasionally. I mean, we certainly do have cookies for desserts and for camping trips and that sort of thing. And you just don't need that butter in there. My motto is change it and reduce it. Well, I sure reduced that. And so these little guys just get dropped on to an oiled cookie sheet. And you know, I love the PAM, the olive oil PAM they have now, because olive oil, remember, is a monounsaturated fat. And you get just such a small skim of it on there that it just doesn't amount to much. So those go in for 10 minutes and come out looking like that. And they are delicious, let me tell you. Now, dairy products don't need to be a big source of fat or saturated fat if you choose wisely. Butter is 100% fat. Yeah, well, there she sits right over there. Cream is 60 to 80% fat. And whole milk is 50% fat, right? Half of all the calories in a glass of whole milk come from fat. 2% milk, hang on here, is 35% fat calories. 1% milk is 23% fat calories. Buttermilk is 20% fat calories, sometimes 20 to 30. And skim milk, my very, very favorite, non-fat skim milk, is 2% fat calories. So we pretty well live on skim milk. Now that's confusing, isn't it, to say that 2% milk has not got 2% fat. Let me just explain this to you. And this is where manufacturers sort of fool people. You know, where's my glass of, well, here, I'll just use this. Manufacturers have traditionally talked about food in terms of weight, so that's fair enough. That's how the tradition grew up. You know, you 8 pounds of oats in this bag. But in terms of fat calories, it's misleading. Here's a glass of water, okay? No calories in there. No fat in there. Water has no calories. But once I put in a pat of butter, now, let's see how it floats. I could honestly say that this, the contents of this glass were, oh golly, say 2% fat. I mean, we would have to weigh this on the scale and see how much more it weighs once I put the butter in. It's virtually nothing in terms of the weight of the glass. But in terms of the calories in the glass, it's immense. Of the calories in this glass, 100% of them are from fat. Do you get my drift? So thank you very much, food manufacturers. When it comes to talking about fat, we don't care what it is in terms of the weight of the product. What we want to know is how many calories in the food come from the source, fat. Now let me just show you how misleading this weight versus calories war can be. I'll get my trusty calculator here. Look at this processed food. Anytime you see highly processed meat touted as low fat, you can be suspicious. Look at this one. It is cooked ham, and up here in the corner it says only 5% fat. You think, wow, 5%. That's a lot less than skinned turkey breast. Well, let us just look at the reality of the situation. You look on the back, and it tells me that in one serving, which I think is 3 slices, in one serving there are 3 grams of fat. Know ye this universal truth: a gram of fat is 9 calories. So 3 times 9 is 27. We've converted apples to apples. We know that there are 27 fat calories in a serving of this meat. And it tells us that the total calories for a serving is 66 calories. They'll generally call it energy. So you divide the total calories into the fat calories. So we have 27 fat calories divided by 66 is 40%. This is 40% fat. Yes, Mr. Manufacturer, it may be that the fat in this container is only 5% of the weight of the ham. We don't care about that. We wanted you to tell us that it's 40% fat calories, which is over the 30% limit that we're supposed to be aiming for. Look at this salami. It says up here at the top, 50% less fat. Now I'll just turn over and I see that in a serving we have 6.5 grams of fat. 6.5 grams of fat times 9, that's right, is 58, and there are in one serving 101 calories. 58 fat calories divided by 101 calories in a serving is 57% fat. He said this is 50% less fat than the regular. Oh, I dread to think how fat the regular would be. It's over 100% fat. This one is 57% fat calories. So you really gotta read labels and know that a gram of fat is worth 9 calories. Now, have I made a mess here or what? Give me a minute just to clean up. Voila, clean. Now in this pancake recipe, the yolk goes to the compost, and the dogs can eat it. And we're only going to use the white. You know, the egg white has no cholesterol, and it's the highest quality protein of all foods. And here's flour. You know why we limit baking soda, baking powder? You know why we limit our eggs? It is not because of the white, it's because of the yolk. And that yolk has the highest concentration of cholesterol of any foods, although that's not the big problem. Big problem is the yolk is 80% fat calories. Of all the calories in the yolk, and most of the calories in an egg are in the yolk, the calories in the yolk are from saturated fat. Sunflower seeds, wheat germ, wheat bran, rolled oats, sesame seeds, crunchy. That's why I like these ones. They're something to chew on. I like the crunch. Now, that cholesterol, yeah, it is major cholesterol, more than any other food, but, you know, eating dietary cholesterol is not a major problem for most healthy folks. Our bodies know how to handle cholesterol. Our livers, now this is egg whites and yogurt. I'll just mix them up and get them in here. When we eat dietary cholesterol, our livers curtail the production of cholesterol to compensate. So that works real well. We don't have to be as afraid of cholesterol as we are saturated fat. Now that works up to a point, and the point is about 300 milligrams a day. So the notion that we should completely avoid seafood because it has cholesterol in it is faulty. You just need to make sure that what you dip that lobster tail in is not drawn butter, but rather maybe non-fat plain yogurt or a no-oil salad dressing. The Aerobic Center suggests that we limit our egg intake, that's the whole egg, to 3 a week plus what is used in cooking. And I find that that's real easy to do, just real reasonable. Now, you know, cholesterol only occurs in animals. No plant makes cholesterol. It doesn't ever exist in plants. So when you get a cookie manufacturer who makes a cookie full of saturated fat, like say he uses palm oil because it's cheap, and he puts on the label, no cholesterol, he's hoping that you don't know the whole story and that you think that's healthy. And I say to him, well, big deal. Of course it doesn't have cholesterol, you weasel, because it doesn't have any animal product in there. But we know that palm and coconut are highly saturated fats and are not good for us. So we're not going to buy that cookie. We're going to look for a cookie that's made with a better fat. Now, these pancakes are going to entice you to eat breakfast. All right, let's just flip these little suckers over. Roll over, Beethoven. Oh, they're coming out nice. Yes. Now look, if you want to lose body weight, body fat, let's talk about body fat. We don't want to lose muscle and bone. You need to be eating breakfast because researchers say that breakfast skippers eat the same number of calories on average that the rest of us do anyway. Problem is, breakfast skippers tend to eat more of their calories late in the day, often at night. And late in the day calories are more likely to be stored as body fat because late in the day your activity and your basal metabolism rate quite normally gears down, you see, and that's when you're going to store more as fat. Oh yes, they are fine. They are fine. Gee, this makes me remember my childhood days in Arkansas. Hot pancakes. So you might as well be eating breakfast and getting the pleasure and getting more of your calories earlier in the day. In fact, the Aerobic Center in Dallas showed that people could reduce body fat simply by skewing their caloric intake earlier in the day, eating the same amount, the same calories they've always eaten, but skewing them earlier in the day. Precisely having 75% of their daily calories by 2 o'clock. That means you got to have 25% of your calories for breakfast, 50% for lunch, and a smaller supper probably than the norm, 25% for supper. Now that means you got to sit down at lunch and eat your biggest meal of the day. And if you're brown bagging it, you know, you really got to pack a full brown bag. But I got to tell you, it's a real painless way to lose body fat. Now, here are my favorite toppings. Put a couple of, I can easily go through 3 of those. And on a Sunday morning after we've done 6 miles, I can hit a few more than 3. Now, I like to have non-fat yogurt with blueberries are just a favorite of mine. And it doesn't matter if they're squashed or on the ripe side. It doesn't matter if they were frozen. Non-fat plain yogurt or strawberries. I like to cut them up, and if they're mushed, all the better, with just my very, very favorite dairy topping, quark. Quark is very low fat. Quark is, I think quark was a German product originally, and we're real lucky in this part of the world. We have 2 manufacturers of quark, so we have 2 to choose from. Then another favorite breakfast of mine is toast. This is a whole rye toast bread. There's no fat in it. It's made with no shortening and no preservatives. And the thing that I like to do, and I'll do it in a restaurant anytime, I say to the waiter, I want the ripest banana you've got, the one that's bound for the garbage can. And I like to just mash that banana on there. It's not a lot to look at, I gotta concede, but it tastes wonderful. And then I spread quark on top of that. And that slides down so easily. In a crunch, I'll take toast and jelly. I mean, yeah, you know, that's pure sugar coming at you, concentrated sugar, but at least there's no fat in it. So toast and jelly on, you know, the average day I can live with. And for breakfast, I would probably drink skim milk. I love it hot. 3 minutes and 30 seconds in the microwave. And I'm not expecting you to, because I think I'm a bit weird on that. I started drinking hot chocolate and then took the sugar out, took the chocolate out, and I was left with skim milk, and I just love it. Or tea or coffee, no problem. Coffee if you don't overdo it. I would tend to eat a piece of fruit rather than the fruit juice, because in the fruit juice you get the concentrated sugar calories, or fructose calories. I prefer the crunch and the fiber and the look and the feel of real fruit. Oh, one more favorite breakfast I forgot to tell you about. The old classic standby, oatmeal. I like to cook mine with water, then I put milk on it to eat. I don't put sugar on it, just raisins. I put the raisins in, the last 4 or 5 minutes so that they plump up. That'll keep me going till tea time. I rarely miss lunch, but should I have to, that would keep me going. Recipe for pancakes at the back of the tape or in this cookbook. Let me clean up again. You eat breakfast, is that a deal? Be right back. Okay, let's talk snacks. I keep carrots and peppers and sometimes celery all cut up. It's right in there, ready to go. And then I can put those in my mouth when I'm absolutely starved and rushed. And you know, sometimes I try and have this out on the platter when Xana hits the door, because whatever's out is what she'll grab. And you know, with a little bit of non-fat salad dressing to dip in, this is just delicious. You say you don't like raw vegetables, I bet you will if they're available. I don't like cutting them up either. I have to concede that that's a bit of a drag. But if you get it done ahead of time, then it really dampens that temptation to stop in the grocery store for that candy bar. You know that's there, it's ready to shove in your mouth. It's amazing how your food discrimination weakens when you're rushed and hungry. In our household, we also use bagels, all kinds of bagels, all whole wheat though, but a variety of whole wheat bagels and rice cakes for snacks, and pretzels, very low fat. Now, occasionally I might weaken and buy Fig Newtons or ginger snaps, because those cookies are only 20% fat. But you see this cookie jar over here? Empty. If I fill that sucker up, she's gone in 2 days. Jim and Xana and I have no control when it comes to goodies, and we eat too many of them. So for the most part, I just keep it empty. That's how I control it. I don't bring it home. I don't deal with it. I certainly wouldn't bring candy home, although in the winter we do sometimes use dried fruit. And you know, the fastest way to put body fat on is to eat sugar with fat, because man, that sugar promotes release of insulin in your pancreas, and that insulin circulating around encourages fat cell enzymes, which are like little doormen. Those little enzymes shift fat into fat storage, and once it's stored, you know how hard it is to burn off. So if you must eat sugar, at least eat sugar with no fat. And here are some ideas. And I'm not saying you ought to be eating this. I'm saying if you have to, this is the best way to go. Hard candies like Lifesavers don't have any fat in them. Jelly beans are fat-free. These little orange slices are fat-free. Marshmallows. Now, Xana and I have been known to sneak the odd marshmallow that was intended for a fruit salad. Candied fruit. This is candied ginger, so this is really candied root rather than candied fruit. There's the little fig Newtons and ginger snaps and angel food cake. Very low fat. A lot of times when company comes, I'll have angel food cake and just a dollop of non-fat frozen yogurt, and it's just delicious. I might, if there's time, bake a banana bread, which is very, very low fat. In fact, I think this one uses no fat, maybe an egg yolk or two. Anyway, the recipe's at the end of the tape. So that's how I handle sweets. I just kind of try not to have them around because I'm no better than the next guy. If they're not around, I do better. So look, complex and simple. Except for the pretzels, all of this basket, the rice cakes and the bagels, and this dried fruit, all of this is complex carbohydrate. Now, all of this stuff, the sweeties, are simple carbohydrate, and of course the vegetables are complex carbohydrate. You want 60% of your total caloric intake to be carbohydrate, preferably complex carbohydrate. This means foods that are not so processed. They're nearer their natural state. Vegetables, fruits, legumes like beans and peas and lentils, and whole grains like whole wheat bread and whole wheat pastas. You know, the whole wheat pasta is not really easy to get, and so we order it by the case. And this stuff will keep in your larder for years. I mean years. This lasagna pasta is a good 3 years old, just getting to the bottom of the barrel on it. Whole wheat bread, this is rye and whole grain rice. This stuff has so much more substance and taste than the refined equivalents. I find white bread and white pasta, white rice, a little boring, you know, just kind of tasteless. These complex carbohydrates still have their little jackets on. They still have the bran or the germ, and so they have a lot more fiber, minerals, and vitamins. When this stuff gets processed, it loses a lot of the nutrition, and as important, it loses, in my mind, a lot of the taste. And remember, a lot of these little jackets, the insoluble fiber, is going to pass right through you. It's not going to be absorbed, so it doesn't contribute to the calorie load. It offers you protection against colon cancer, and it keeps you regular. My very favorite complex carbohydrate meal is what I call all-in-one steamer basket, quick and dirty. I take a steamer basket in a pot of water, and I put in the hard stuff first. I would typically put in potato, parsnips, carrots, and then you let that steam for a little while. And when you have a sense that that's beginning to soften, 8 minutes or so, you put in the slightly softer stuff. For me, that would be broccoli. I love cauliflower. And you let that go. You'll get the knack of this real quick. Let that go 5 minutes or so. And you know, you're always kind of poking it with a knife to see how she's doing. And then just at the end, you add the delicate fruits, vegetables, carbs. I like green onions, snow peas, and any kind of pepper. Green, yellow, red. I love peppers. So then you let that go just a few minutes more, and then I dump it out and add salt and pepper. I don't really monitor my salt intake because I exercise regularly, and you know, a lot of our sodium consumption doesn't come from adding salt at the table. It comes from processed foods, particularly processed meats and soups. And since I don't eat processed meats and make all my own soups, I can afford a few sprinkles and salt and pepper at the table, thank you very much. So This to me is a heavenly meal. And I'll salt and pepper that, and I'll put a little dollop of non-fat salad dressing, and then I'll just kind of dip around into that. I use that as a little bit of a dip and eat it. Now that is really quick and dirty. Okay, baked potatoes. A poor lowly potato. It's such good carbohydrate. And we tend to eat ours with toppings of legumes, beans. I will put a bean dip, which I get from the Guiltless Gourmet. Have you heard about the Guiltless Gourmet down in Austin, Texas? Makes non-fat bean dip. So I'll put my non-fat bean dip there, and I'll top it with quark. Or I'll put just beans, just whole beans right out of the can. Nothing could be simpler. And top that. I would tend to use quark, but others of my family prefer non-fat plain yogurt. And that's almost a meal in itself. In fact, that's exactly what Xana and Jim had last night. Now let's just talk about this potato for a minute. Potatoes are 1% fat calories, 1 measly percent. But if you mash them, with cream and butter, we're talking 41%. If you French fry them, all those little surfaces get covered with fat. That's 43%. And if you eat this wonderful vegetable as a potato chip, it's 63% fat calories. So go backwards. Take things in their complex state, their more natural state. I want to tell you more about complex carbohydrates, but let me clean up. Virtually all fruit is fat-free. Most fruit has 0 to a trace of fat. The exceptions are some of the berries. Strawberries, grapes, blackberries, cranberries have 12 to 17% fat calories, still not a problem. The two biggies, though, are avocado and olives. And avocado is 88% fat calories, and olives are 96% fat calories. Remember, olive oil. Now, it's a good heart-healthy oil, but still fattening. Vegetables are virtually free of fat. A trace, we're talking minimal amount. I rely heavily on vegetables in my diet. I bake them, steam them, broil them. The exception is soybeans. Soybeans are 39% fat, and because tofu is concentrated soybeans, it is 53% fat. And there's no end of breads to eat that are fat-free. Bagels have very little fat. Pita bread has none. Tortillas, even the flour tortillas, are only 20% fat, and the corn tortillas are virtually fat-free, except, of course, for the fat naturally occurring in the corn, and then all of those whole grain breads, the rye breads, and they're so filling and wonderful. This is opposed, of course, to croissant, donuts, biscuits that are 40 and 60% fat, and crackers. You can find low-fat crackers stuffed with a crunch. Cracker Jacks is not bad at all. These are all 0 to 20% fat calories. Cracker Jacks, brittle bread, which has no fat in it except that naturally occurs in rye grain, pretzels, even little animal crackers are not very fat, not over 20% fat. And Guiltless Gourmet taco chips. That's not any taco chips. It's only this one that's no oil, I promise you. No oil tortilla chips. They're baked, they're not fried, and that makes the difference. So there is no problem getting 60% of your caloric intake from good non-fat carbohydrate. It's the produce section of the grocery store. Okay, let's take a break. I'll move this out. Protein. Protein should be only 15% of your calories, and eating more will not make more muscle. Excess protein gets stored as fat, and you know how hard that is to get rid of. Most North Americans actually get enough protein. What we need to work on is getting protein without fat. And some of the best protein sources are also our best sources for other critical nutrients, like red meat, because red meat not only gives us good protein, it gives us good iron. And plant iron, this is spinach, is less well absorbed by our bodies than meat iron, animal iron. Plant iron is called non-heme, and animal iron is called heme. So it's the heme that really does the trick. You know, women lose a lot of iron. We lose it via menstruation monthly, all through our childbearing years, and so we need regular dietary iron. And lack of iron is the most common nutritional deficiency in all of North America. So I say don't avoid red meat, just eat smaller servings and eat leaner cuts. I use buffalo. It is so lean and it is so delicious. You don't get that greasy taste in the roof of your mouth. I buy the sirloin and I buy extra lean hamburger, and damn the cost, because you know what? I only eat it once or twice a week, and I only eat 3 to 4 ounces when I eat it. So it's not as though I'm consuming a great deal. The hamburgers are so lean, I buy them frozen, that if we let them thaw out and then put them on the grill, they fall apart. So I cook them frozen. I put them on the grill straight from the freezer. If you don't have access to very lean hamburger meat, you ought to just buy round steak and grind it yourself, patty it up, put wax paper in between each patty so that you can get them apart from the freezer, and then cook them frozen. Works like a charm. Now, there are 3 tricks to get the iron out of plants to absorb better, and one is called the meat factor. If you combine just a few ounces, this is 3 ounces of meat, if you combine plant iron with animal iron, the animal iron helps the plant iron be absorbed by your body. So fancy a nice spinach salad. I, again, have just chosen a non-fat salad dressing that I happen to like, with a little tiny little steak. It could even be less than that. Trick 2, citrus fruit or vitamin C helps plant iron be absorbed. And so I wouldn't have any trouble just eating a little bit of fruit or drinking a glass of orange juice with this meal. But you know, a lot of spinach salads will even have a little mandarin orange slices right in there. Somebody knows that. And third trick, if you cook acidic foods like, say, tomatoes in cast iron cookware, this is my pasta sauce, the acidic foods leach out some of the iron from the pot. It goes into the food, and when you eat the food, it's quite well absorbed by your body. And you know, this is the most simple pasta sauce. I do not oil a pan. I just start with a little bit of tomato juice. I throw in cut onions, just let them come to transparency. Then just start adding tomatoes, fresh tomatoes, and then basil. Just throw in basil. And I love it. It's just so crunchy. Now, I've never ground it up. I don't, you know, I like my teeth doing something. I've never put it in the Cuisinart and reduced it smooth. I suppose you could do that, but man, that's something that I keep as a staple in the fridge, and then we put that on whole wheat pasta and we're home free. So, you know, I'd be hard pressed without a little bit of my red meat. I don't think I could keep my iron stores up. Now, one word of warning, the tannic acid in tea inhibits iron absorption. So drink your tea away from your iron-rich meals. Have that first thing in the morning, say, or last thing at night, so that you don't have that tannic acid in your stomach at the same time you have your iron-rich foods. Now, what is good for the goose is not always good for the gander. And men do not need as much dietary iron as women because they don't menstruate, they don't lose it. And although humans only absorb about 10% of the iron they eat, some men are genetically disposed to absorb much more, and they can suffer from iron overload, which may put them at risk to cancer and some researchers think even heart disease. So push the iron to the females, the menstruating females in the family, but not so much to the men. Now let's just have a look at red meat. The buffalo is very lean. This is venison. This comes from my friend Renee, whose husband is a hunter. The venison is only 14% fat, very lean. And this is round steak. And you can see that it is just slightly marbled. I don't have any problem with that at all, but my fave is the buffalo. Now this compares to filet mignon, which is 60 to 80%, probably over 80%. Spare ribs, hot dogs, pepperoni, all those processed meats are way over 80% fat calories. Let's talk about fish. The fat in fish, and fish are for the most part low fat. The fat in fish has a special value. It is called omega-3 fatty acids. And most nutritionists would agree that North Americans would benefit by eating at least 2 fish meals a week. Let me get this little guy out of here. And that's because those omega-3 fatty acids are different than most fats. They play a significant role in preventing the blood clots and buildup of cholesterol on our artery walls that cause heart disease and stroke. So, you know, for the health of it, not to mention the taste of it, fish once or twice a week. Now, fresh fish, of course, has lots of omega-3 fatty acids, but so does canned fish. So you want a tuna sandwich. If sodium is a concern to you, rinse your canned tuna, and that will get rid of about 40% of the sodium in there. And I would just add pickles and egg whites and fat-free mayonnaise to make a tuna fish sandwich. Frozen fish is okay too for omega-3 fatty acids. I would just warn you to be careful of fish oil capsules, because the pollutants in fish concentrate in the fats. And I know where this fish came from, but if I go to the store and buy a bottle of fish oil capsules, I haven't a clue where those fish came from. So, and we don't even know that they work. We know that eating fish works. It tends to prevent heart disease. We don't know about the fish oil capsules. Most seafood, golly, I do love seafood, is 0 to 20% fat. It's really quite low. You don't need to be worried about cholesterol in shrimp or oysters or scallops, because as long as you don't exceed 300 milligrams a day, your liver is going to compensate that. Now, swordfish, which a lot of us love to grill because it's so unfishy, is 30 to 40% fat calories, and 40 to 60% fat calories gets us into anchovies and rainbow trout, and then 60 to 80% fat calories, still a good fat, but fattening, lake trout, and one of my favorites, Chinook salmon. So when you have those fish, just don't have a plate full, just be moderate. Now, dairy produce gives us protein as well as calcium. And calcium is really important, again, to women. By the way, skim milk actually has slightly more calcium than whole milk. I'm glad to know it's not the other way around. A third of women in North America are going to be affected by osteoporosis because of menopause. You know, when we cease to menstruate, we cease to make estrogen. And so the calcium comes out of our bones, leaving them brittle and frail. And by the time we reach old age, a third of all women and a sixth of all men will have hip fractures due to osteoporosis. So the Aerobic Center advises 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams for all women, milligrams of calcium. Men should have 1,000 milligrams of calcium today. And sit down. The average North American averages only 400 milligrams of calcium a day. We're way below where we should be on calcium. 8 ounces of skim milk has 300 milligrams a glass. There's a 300 milligrams of calcium. A cup of non-fat plain yogurt has 400 milligrams a day. So all of us women need to be having this much calcium every single day, so that when we pass menopause, we'll have good, strong bones. Alas, cottage cheese does not have much calcium in it. And by the way, dairy products have 2 nutrients in them that help us use this calcium effectively in our bodies. They are the milk sugar we call lactose and vitamin D. Now, dairy products needn't be real heavy on fat. Quark is a cheese. Well, I call it a cheese, and the manufacturer calls it a cheese. It looks very much like frozen yogurt. That's very little fat. 1% cottage cheese. Of course, that's 1% fat by weight, but it's still under 20% fat calories. But when we get up into the hard cheeses, we're talking about 80% fat calories. Even part skim mozzarella is 50% fat calories. Yes, feta is way up there with the hard cheeses. So I kind of have quit using hard cheese. I might maybe at the most I would do is just sprinkle a little bit on the top of something as a garnish. I don't even like to do that. You know, the cooked bones in salmon, and this is tuna, but you know you've opened a salmon can, and those little round, don't throw them out. Those little round bones are packed with calcium. Throw them in the dish and let them be eaten. Shall I clean up one more time? Okay. So we know that we need 60% of our daily caloric intake as carbohydrate, 20, 25, maximum 30% as fat, 15% of our daily calories as protein. We need calcium, we need iron. Do we need vitamins? No, not if you eat a well-rounded diet, if you're not pregnant, if you're not traveling in the third world where you can't get the foods you need, if you're not chronically sick. You'll get your nutrients from food, and that's where you should get them, not from pills. Do we need alcohol? No. And I would really warn you, if you are wanting to lose body fat, to avoid alcohol, because there are a lot of calories and it doesn't give you much nutrition in return. The best way I've found to eat low fat is, for the most part, day in and day out, tend to choose foods that are less than 30% fat calories. And that's not to say I will never have a piece of chocolate cheesecake, but more often my dessert would be a low-fat loaf cake or a piece of fruit. You don't want to get into this black and white perfectionist thinking that if I have a piece of chocolate cheesecake, I have relapsed and it's all for nothing and I'm just going to collapse. You're allowed these things once in a while. We're not going to be perfect. We're just going to be better. Oh, and be sparing of nuts. You know what the leanest nuts are? Lychee nuts and water chestnuts are 0 to 20% fat calories. But you get up into your pecans, we're talking 95% fat calories. Almonds, sesame seeds are high, all those nuts, and macadamia nuts are 97% fat calories. We're almost talking butter. I think knowing what to eat and doing it are two different things. You need to learn to distinguish between craving and hunger. Hunger is when, and hunger should be satisfied, craving not necessarily. Hunger, you've got a gnawing in your stomach, or you have a headache or feel lightheaded when you've not eaten for hours, or you're hungry at a certain time of day every day. That's hunger. Craving is when you want a certain taste. I just gotta have sugar. Or you're stimulated to eat by the sight or someone talking about a certain food. Or you've just had a big meal and you still want dessert. I think the solution to craving is distraction. Get busy doing something else, start sewing or go paint or play the piano or whatever's your bag. But for me, the best thing is to leave, to physically remove myself. And of course, that's what I do by not bringing the candy home. If it's at home, I would eat it. And store your weakness foods, the things that you might overeat, out of sight. Out of sight, out of mind. The farther away, the better. I wish you good health. I think the rules are pretty simple. It's just the stress of changing, and you have to change over time, not all at once. I would encourage you to exercise regularly and eat less fat, not less food. Hang in there.